Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. Finally back from being sick. Thank you so much for your patience, but I'm here with the Summer Jayden Review Part 1, the stats overview that everyone's been very much waiting for, so sorry for the wait. Let's not make you wait any longer, though. We'll jump into things. Today, for Part 1, we're going to go over the character overview, the base stat analysis, the total stat analysis, a Jayden comparison, which I think is going to help people understand exactly what you should expect from him a lot easier, and then a quick dexterity point to remind you all of, followed up finally by the report card. Now, I will be doing parts 2 and 3 again. Part 2 will be the class and job analysis, an AI and auto prioritization, the TMR review of how it fits into the game, and then my general thoughts now that we've seen the stats and the character kit all together. That'll be coming shortly today or tomorrow. And then part 3 is where we finally elevate our Jayden usage, where I'm going to go a deep dive into the AP management of him, where there is something semi-unique about him as a magic scaling character, but then also going in the Esper synergies, weapon optimization, vision card analysis, and the trust stone optimization, all of which actually do have some tangible effects from the different builds you can have with him, because he does have some unique characteristics. Now for the character overview though, brand new wind unit as a global exclusive summer unit. He has the beachside stag main job that they've given that's unique to him, with the arithmetician and scholar subjobs, which are actually kind of interesting from a passive and overall just general build perspective. He does equip guns with hats, cloth, and accessories as the other equipment types, with a move of 3, jump of 1 as a cost 100 unit. Now from a resistance standpoint, overall a little bit of boomer bust in some of these categories. 15% to slash and 20% to missile are good starting points as really popular attack types. He's neutral to magic at 0%, which is fine. You can certainly build him up from there, but he does have the double-digit negative resistances both to pierce and strike at 10%. Now, a little worrisome, but those are some shorter range characters typically that you may not have to always worry about the range that they have in most instances. But at least for the more common types, it's nice to see him have some inherently good starting points. Now, from the status ailment perspective, this is important to keep in mind because he is most definitely a unit you will have at 97 faith because he does use magic scaling abilities. He's 50% resistant to paralysis and disable, two that are less common, ones that we haven't seen as often. Disable is a pretty horrendous one to get afflicted by, so it's nice that he has that, but you just don't see them in many of the common metas at the moment. But the 10% to blind actually is tangible, where sure it may not block everything when it comes to blind status effects, but at least is a nice starting point that when you do add up extra blind status resistant stuff, whether it's trust stone passives or equipment, that 10% certainly is material considering he's at 97 faith. Now, segueing into the base stat analyses, HP-wise, he is in the middle, let's say maybe on the little lower side, but not worryingly so. He is a long-range missile unit, so when you look at the comparisons here, he is amongst good company in terms of Cetia and Eliza, who was just recently released, some of the bulkier evade units. So yes, maybe skews a little bit lower on the HP side of things, but not worryingly so. These types of units are usually in this ballpark. Now, from a magic perspective, I have heard a lot of people kind of get a little worried about this. He does skew on the lower end of the magic spectrum compared to other magic units, but I think a lot of people are correlating that to damage potential when they really shouldn't be. If you really were to look at the highest top tier magic units, most of them skew support so that they can get their curative abilities to maximum potential. And where he sits here in terms of base magic, sure, it's a little bit lower, but overall, I promise, doesn't really impact his overall damage output that much. We're going to get into why in just a couple slides here, but he is at 350. But if you look at some of the other comparisons here, Black Rosalena, Sweetheart Celir, regular Jayden, like there's certainly some strong damage dealers here that I don't think you have to worry about overall damage output based off this stat alone. Now we get into the agility side of things. He is, let's say, in the top 20. He's a very fast unit sitting here at 60 base agility, definitely skews higher than your average unit. And that actually is very important, as you'll see on the report card, when it comes to his overall agility in the broad scheme of the game, that he does start off on the higher side of things here. Dexterity wise, top 10 unit, this is really critical to his kit, pun intended, because this does hit his critical hit rate, which I need to remind you of in a couple slides here when we talk about dexterity overall. But this does certainly also help his accuracy, where being in the top 10 units does give you a nice starting point for what your base accuracy tends to look like. And on that topic, luck kind of in the same realm here, where he is on the higher side of things, surprisingly. Now, not enough so that you'd ever consider him an evade unit. I'll talk a little bit about that on the report card here, but the luck stat is vitally important when it comes to accuracy as well. And it's nice that he does at least have a little above average here to kind of help him in that regard. Now, when we talk about reconciling the base stats to total stats, this radial chart is really to show the character where they stack up compared to all the other characters in the game from a base stat perspective. This does include tanks and support, so it is a little bit wonky in terms of some of the outliers. But overall, he actually does look pretty good from a base stat perspective, better than most characters, to be honest, in terms of where he starts in terms of luck, magic, dexterity, and agility here. Now, where he tends to fall a little bit shorter is that most characters get a little bit extra when it comes to the board nodes and the mastery abilities, things of that nature, where you can see here, once you start, putting in the total stats of all the characters, he does take a big setback on the magic side. Same for the luck side and the HP side here, but not necessarily materially so. It's just that he doesn't get any boosts to those stats where most other characters do. And if you look at the breakdown here, this third line here, the board nodes, is where characters typically get a lot of their extra stats, whether it be HP or attack or magic or who knows what. And same with the mastery ability, where a lot of characters get some extra boost to their stats, and Jayden really doesn't get anything from those aspects of his kit. He does get an AP plus 20% as his board node, which is going to come in to that part 3 of the AP analysis, which is very important, quite honestly. It's nothing wrong with that. But in total, he ends up at this roughly 3,300 HP, about 380 magic, 67 agility, the dexterity and luck as you see here. Now, when trying to visualize, how impactful are some of these stats, it's actually really helpful to look at regular Jayden, who is kind of an apples to apples comparison, where they are both missile-oriented units, where they do have attacks that scale off their magic stat. They do have some magic-based abilities, where regular Jayden has jamming thrust, and Summer Jayden has arithmetician and the scholar. If you're looking at overall main stats here, though, Summer Jayden is slightly bulkier from an HP perspective, maybe not hugely so, but every little bit counts here. Magic-wise, definitely has the setback where regular Jayden's at 444, Summer Jayden's only at 380, but I'm going to circle back on this to tell you why there's some upside to this number. Agility, they're about even at 66, 67. Summer Jayden actually has higher dexterity values by a decent amount, and same with the luck value, both of which overall contribute to a higher accuracy, particularly with passives, which is what this number is, where Jayden has, or Summer Jayden, has a 20% accuracy passive that, when all things considered, on average he does do much better than regular Jayden from an accuracy perspective. Now, circling back to the magic stat, though, a lot of people, again, see this, they think he's much weaker, but it's a different kind of damage output, where, again, it's not just off the magic stat, but also penetration. That when you consider missile resistance penetration, Summer Jayden has 20% innately in his mastery ability, and then they both have a passive, which is 40% spear penetration, but Summer Jayden has an ability where you can boost it by another 40 to get up to 80% spear penetration. So when you talk about tank busting, Summer Jayden definitely has more of that upside potential, where regular Jayden does kind of have a ceiling to what he can do to some of those tanks. And all in all, these two attributes obviously vastly affect the damage potential of both of these units. And same can be said for their critical hit rates, which we're going to talk about right now. Now, this chart doesn't mean much by itself. I'm going to kind of talk through it in just a bullet point, essentially, where when you recall, talking about accuracy, when you get to dexterity levels above 400 and much higher, there's a diminishing effect of how much accuracy you get from those extremely high levels of dexterity. It's just the way the formula works. There's diminishing returns. That same thing can't necessarily be said for a critical hit. It is diminishing, but not the same degree. This chart doesn't really tell you much, but anyone that really knows how to read it would tell you that the slope of the crit hit rate line is way higher in the crit hit rate, which means you get more return for your dexterity. And just kind of putting some numbers to this, the difference between 400 dexterity and 740 dexterity, from an accuracy perspective, it's only 24% extra accuracy, but from a crit rate perspective, it's 50% extra crit rate. That's where the dexterity matters, particularly not just on Jayden, but all missile units, where they do tend to skew lower on their attack stat values as a trade-off for more reliably hitting critical hits, which at the end of the day is a big part of the damage formula, particularly when you consider all the crit damage up modifiers you can add to a character. I just wanted to put this in here as a supplement to remind you why he still does a lot of damage, if not for no other reason than the extra crit rate here. Now, from the DPS report card, everyone's favorite portion, effective HP, I'm giving him a C. Kind of surprisingly a little higher than your average missile unit. Maybe a little more generous than it needs to be, but he does have 10 AoE resistance on the vision card. He does have access to a 12 defense passive, which is very, very nice. You won't always have that on, though. He does have 2 defense innately, so it does skew as a physical EHP a little higher to that B-. Magic is rather ambivalent. He's got no spirit, no magic resistance, so nothing too crazy there. But overall, not the weakest, not the strongest, certainly kind of in the middle of the pack. From the primary stat perspective, as we've already talked about, basically average as well at that C, but he does have great penetration options, and the high crit rate makes up for the overall damage output of the magic stat. that does have some ramifications when you talk about the Arithmetician sub-job for what he might do for magic type damage, but that's a whole other topic that we're going to get into in the third part with the Vision cards and the Trust Stone optimizations. From an agility perspective, I'm giving him a C. He is also average at the end of the day, but this C is very much understated as he has a buff, it's his opening buff, that is an increase of agility of 25%. That's effectively an extra 15% agility on turn 1 for him. So this is a C. It can be much higher though, but it is a dispellable ability. So, you know, you got to keep things in context when you think of it from that perspective. But he does get very, very fast. So don't get fooled by his grading here. Now, accuracy wise, I am giving him an A. He is, we'll say, in the higher quartile of overall accuracy, particularly with the 20% extra passive, but he does have a 100% sure hit ability, which is one of the main abilities which is going to spam. It's not some random sub-job one-off ability. This is a main part of his kit, which is 100% accuracy. So for that perspective, I'm just rounding him up to an A in general. You obviously do need to gear him for top tier evade, but he just starts off much better than other characters, obviously. Now, evasion-wise, I'm giving him a C-. Maybe there's a fringe case that he evades an attack here and there when you're in a hyper evade comp, but don't bet on it. He's really at the very bottom cost of what you could anticipate for evasion. Movement, he has a C, doesn't have anything to adjust the move or jump, totally fine. When you get into the actual kit though, passive-wise, I'm giving him a B. The passives are actually pretty nice. They're just slightly limiting though, where ideally you'd probably want to have 3 of them on at any one time, but obviously you can only pick up from 2, and that's going to kind of have some give and take depending upon the 2 that you pick. Now, counter-wise, I'm actually going a C. I'm almost tempted to go even lower than that. His passives are not only very average, but one of them has a serious drawback, which we're going to get to in the second part here. Overall, kit-wise, though, giving him a B+. It's a little vanilla in some regards, but it is impactful at the end of the day with what it does for utility, what it does for range and damage types, and how it overall affects the team fight. So giving him a B+ from that perspective for an overall grade of a B+. Again, the kit really does have a significant weight here. He's not a meta-defining unit, he's not a must-pull, but he's a very good unit. And quite honestly, he's going to appear even better than he really is because of the strength of the wind cast overall, where right now their vision cards, their characters, their tanks, their supports, their damage dealers, they are just, Gumi's just like feeding them good right now. They are eating good. And so Jayden obviously is going to benefit greatly from that, but that doesn't change the fact that at the end of the day, he's still a B+ character. He's not any better or worse than many of the other wind units. But that's the Summer Jayden Part 1 review in a nutshell. Very excited to get working on Part 2 here. Shouldn't take me too long to turn around. I've been using him in limited Guild Wars. I had him maxed on day 1. We're entering the Arena week now where he's the bonus unit as well. So we're going to see a lot of min-maxing and tinkering in the Arena. So we're going to have lots to talk about from that perspective in Parts 2 and 3. But for now, thanks for watching. Again, thank you for waiting, and I will talk to you all soon.